I never thought I'd be able to say yes to working at the place everyone called the career graveyard. But there I was, 3 years later, wearing the most expensive wedding dress I'd ever bought in my life, looking at the man I met while he was serving burnt coffee at 6 in the morning. But let's go back to the beginning of this crazy story. 3 years earlier, the sound of the door slamming echoed through the house like a cannon shot. Bella Blackwood ran down the stairs, still in her pajamas, her golden blonde hair disheveled and looking like a bird's nest after a hurricane. Even in her morning chaos, she was breathtakingly beautiful, the kind of natural beauty that made people do double takes on the street with bright blue eyes and features that belonged on magazine covers. "What happened this time?" she shouted from the stairs, already knowing that Penelope, her half-sister, was having another one of her morning dramatics. "That job!" Penelope appeared in the living room like a brunette storm, waving her arms theatrically. "That horrible job at the cafe on Disappointment Street. Dad wants me to take it." Bella stopped halfway down the stairs, blinking slowly. "Wait, you're screaming because you don't want to work. It's not just any job." Penelope threw herself dramatically onto the Victorian sofa that cost more than Bella's car. "It's Storm Cafe. That cursed place where nobody lasts more than 2 weeks. They say even the customers run away." "So, don't take it?" Bella came down the rest of the stairs, trying to understand the logic of the situation. "I can't. Dad said if I don't accept, he'll cut off my allowance and I'll have to get a real job." Penelope made a face like she'd sucked on a sour lemon. "A real job, Bella, with fixed hours and normal people." Bella rolled her eyes. At 25, Penelope still lived as if she were a princess in a fairy tale, funded by their rich father who felt guilty for remarrying when she was 8 years old. The result? A spoiled half-sister who treated Bella like inconvenient furniture, despite Bella's stunning looks that often made Penelope jealous. "What a Greek tragedy," Bella murmured, heading to the kitchen to make coffee. The real coffee she needed to survive another day in that house. "You don't understand." Penelope followed her, high heels clicking on the marble floor. "My reputation will be ruined. Imagine when my friends find out I'm working at that dump. I'll become a joke at the club." Bella paused with the cup halfway to her lips. A crazy and probably stupid idea began to form in her mind. An idea that could solve several problems at once. "What if—" She began slowly, her blonde hair catching the morning light streaming through the window. "What if I took the job?" Penelope stopped pacing in circles. "You?" "Me." Bella took a sip of coffee, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I need work anyway, and you, well, you need not to work. Problem solved." "But Dad said that I have to accept." "Dad said someone from the family has to accept. Technically, I'm family." Bella paused. "Half family, at least." Penelope looked at her as if she had just offered to jump off a cliff. "You would do that? For me?" "For me," Bella thought. "To get out of this house and out of your shadow once and for all." "Of course," she said aloud, tucking a strand of golden hair behind her ear. "What are sisters for?" Penelope's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Bella, you're an angel! A saving angel! I'll convince Dad right now." And so, in an impulse she would later describe as temporarily insane, Bella Blackwood accepted to work at the place the entire city considered cursed. 1 week later, Bella stood in front of Storm Cafe at 5:30 in the morning, holding keys that seemed to weigh a ton. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, but even in work clothes, she looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. The establishment was on a strange corner of the city, between a flower shop that only sold dead flowers and an antique store that was never open. The cafe's sign was faded, with a painting of a cup being struck by lightning, subtle as a brick to the face. "Well," she murmured to herself, her blue eyes reflecting the early morning light. "At least it'll be interesting." She turned the key in the lock, pushed the door, and— crash. A pile of plates fell right on her head. "Shit!" shouted a male voice from the back of the cafe. "Sorry, I warned that pile was unstable, but Diego insisted that a man came running from the back, stopped abruptly when he saw her, and Bella felt as if someone had flipped a switch somewhere in her chest. He had messy brown hair that seemed to have a life of its own, green eyes that sparkled even in the cafe's dim light, and was covered in flour from head to toe. He also had an expression of absolute panic on his face. For a moment, he just stared at her, clearly stunned by her beauty, even with bits of broken plate in her golden hair. You're the new employee?" he asked, looking at the pile of broken dishes at her feet. "I am." Bella pulled a piece of plate from her hair, somehow managing to look graceful even in the chaos. "And you must be the reason nobody lasts 2 weeks here." To her surprise, he started laughing. A genuine, contagious laugh that made something strange happen in Bella's stomach. "Sorry," he said, still laughing. "I'm Maximilian Torrent, but everyone calls me Max, and you just got a free sample of what I call Chaos Cafe." "Bella Blackwood," she replied, trying not to smile. "And that's a very creative way to welcome someone." "Wait until you see what happens when I try to make cappuccino," Max said, starting to collect the pieces. "Last week I almost set the coffee machine on fire." "Twice," came a tired voice from the back. A tall, thin black man appeared, shaking his head. "Twice in the same week. I'm Diego Santos, the manager of this war zone disguised as a cafe." Bella looked around. The place had potential. High ceilings, large windows, decor that could be cozy if it wasn't covered in dust, and... was that a burn mark on the wall? "Yeah," Diego followed her gaze. "Max tried to flambe a croissant. Long story." "Hey!" Max protested, looking genuinely offended. "That was a culinary experiment." "That almost scared a 70-year-old lady to death," Diego replied. "She said it was exciting." "She fainted, Max." "She recovered." Bella found herself laughing, and for the first time in months, it wasn't a forced laugh. These two were completely crazy, but there was something about their dynamic that made her feel welcome, like she was part of the joke instead of being the joke. "So," she said, taking off her coat and revealing her natural beauty that made both men momentarily speechless. "Where do we start?" Diego and Max exchanged glances. "Are you sure?" Diego asked. "Because I'm not going to lie. This place is challenging." "Challenging like we're going to conquer the world, or challenging like we're going to die trying?" Bella asked, her blue eyes twinkling with mischief. "Yes," both answered in unison. Bella smiled, a real smile, for the first time in weeks. "Perfect. I always wanted an adventure." And while Max stared at her with an expression she couldn't decipher, clearly smitten by the gorgeous blonde who'd just walked into his chaotic world, and Diego muttered something about another brave soul for the slaughter, Bella Blackwood had no idea she had just taken the first step toward the greatest adventure of her life. After all, as she would discover soon enough, some of the best stories begin with broken plates and a man covered in flour who laughs at his own disasters. If someone had told Bella that her first week at Storm Cafe would involve 3 minor fires, 1 flood, a customer stuck in the bathroom, and falling hopelessly in love with a walking disaster, she would have laughed. Now, standing in the middle of what looked like a coffee apocalypse, she wasn't laughing. She was oddly exhilarated. "Max!" Diego's voice echoed from the storage room. "Please tell me you didn't try to improve the espresso machine again." "Define improve," Max called back, frantically wiping coffee grounds from every conceivable surface while stealing glances at Bella, who somehow managed to look stunning even covered in espresso. It was Thursday morning, and Bella was learning that working at Storm Cafe was like being trapped in a beautiful caffeinated tornado. Every day brought new adventures in chaos, and every day she found herself more fascinated by the green-eyed hurricane that was Max Torrent. "Bella, duck!" Max shouted. She dropped just as the milk frother exploded, sending a geyser of hot foam across the cafe. A regular customer, Mrs. Henderson, didn't even flinch. She just held up her newspaper as a shield and continued reading. "Tuesday was the blender," she said calmly. "Wednesday was the toaster. I was wondering what Thursday would bring, "Sorry, Mrs. Henderson," Max called, his hair now decorated with foam, making him look like a deranged snow angel. "Coffee's on the house." "Coffee's always on the house after your disasters, dear," Mrs. Henderson replied with surprising fondness. "That's why I keep coming back." Bella grabbed a towel, marveling at how the customers here seemed genuinely entertained by the chaos rather than annoyed. In the past week, she'd discovered that Storm Cafe had developed a cult following of people who came specifically to witness Max's spectacular failures. "Here, let me help," she offered, reaching for the milk frother at the same time as Max. Their hands touched, and Bella felt that now familiar electric shock that made her stomach flutter like a butterfly convention. Max froze, his green eyes meeting her blue ones, and for a moment, the chaos around them seemed to pause. Max stammered, his cheeks flushing pink beneath the foam. "Thanks." "No problem," Bella managed, her voice slightly breathless. "We're a team, right?" "Team Disaster," Diego appeared, surveying the carnage with the resigned expression of a war veteran. "Population, us." "Hey!" Max protested, finally releasing Bella's hand. "I prefer Team Adventure." "Adventure implies some level of planning," Diego shot back. "You're pure chaos theory in motion." Bella laughed, and the sound made Max's face light up like Christmas morning. She was beginning to realize that making Max smile was becoming her favorite part of each day. "Speaking of chaos," she said, wringing out her towel, "what happened to the last person who worked here, the one before me?" Diego and Max exchanged looks. "Amelia," Max said carefully. "She was nice." "Define nice in the context of someone who quit after 11 days, Bella pressed, suddenly curious about her predecessor. "She lasted almost 2 weeks, Max said defensively. "That's practically a record." "She lasted until you accidentally locked her in the walk-in freezer," Diego corrected. "That was an accident. For 3 hours, Max. I thought she went home." Bella raised an eyebrow. "You locked someone in the freezer?" "The lock is tricky." Max's hands gestured wildly, sending droplets of foam flying. "And she was very quiet. How was I supposed to know she was making inventory?" "Maybe by checking before you locked up," Diego suggested with exaggerated patience. "Details," Max waved dismissively, then caught Bella's amused expression. "But I would never lock you in a freezer. I mean, I'd check, multiple times. I'd probably develop a whole system." He was babbling now, and Bella found it absolutely adorable. She'd never met anyone who could be so competent at creating disasters and so endearing while doing it. "Good to know I rank above freezer imprisonment," she said with a grin that made Max's knees go slightly wobbly. The bell above the door chimed, and a woman in an expensive suit walked in, her eyes immediately scanning the foam-covered cafe with barely concealed horror. "Oh no," Max whispered. "Health inspector?" "Worse," Diego muttered. "Food blogger." The woman approached the counter, stepping carefully around the puddles of milk foam, her designer heels clicking ominously. She had the predatory smile of someone who specialized in destroying small businesses with scathing reviews. "Good morning," she said with fake sweetness. "I'm Miranda Sharp from Foodie's Paradise blog. I'm here for a surprise review." Bella saw Max go pale. In the week she'd been here, she'd learned that despite all the chaos, he genuinely cared about the cafe. His disasters weren't from lack of caring. They were from caring too much and trying too hard. "Perfect timing," Bella said smoothly, her natural charm taking over. "We just finished testing our new avant-garde presentation style." "Avant-garde?" Miranda looked skeptical. "Oh yes," Bella continued, moving gracefully around the counter despite the treacherous foam patches. "Interactive dining. The foam installation you see here represents the storm of flavors in our signature blend. Very immersive." Max stared at her in amazement as she transformed his latest disaster into artisanal innovation. "And our barista," Bella gestured toward Max, who still looked like he'd been attacked by a cappuccino machine, "specializes in dramatic coffee preparation. It's dinner theater, but for breakfast." "Interesting," Miranda said, pulling out her phone to take pictures. Very bold choice. We like to think outside the cup, Bella said with such confidence that even Diego started to believe it. Max, catching on, straightened his shoulders. Would you like to try our house special? I call it the Tempest in a Teacup. It's a journey of flavors that mirrors the unpredictable nature of weather patterns. For the next hour, Bella watched Max transform from walking disaster to passionate artisan, explaining each intentional element of chaos as artistic expression. She found herself falling a little more in love with every word. When Miranda finally left, with a promised positive review about their revolutionary approach to interactive cafe experiences, Max turned to Bella with an expression of pure awe. You, he said softly, are incredible. We, she corrected, stepping closer. We are incredible. And as Diego quietly started cleaning up around them, muttering about insurance premiums and the fine line between disaster and art, Bella realized she'd never been happier to be covered in coffee foam in her entire life. Bella, I think we have a situation, Max announced, staring at the coffee machine with the expression of someone who'd just discovered their pet goldfish had learned to tap dance. It was Friday afternoon, exactly 2 weeks since Bella had started at Storm Cafe, and she was officially past the dreaded 2-week curse. More importantly, she was officially, completely, utterly in love with the beautiful disaster that was Max Torrent, though she hadn't quite worked up the courage to tell him that yet. Define situation, Bella said, approaching cautiously. Experience had taught her that Max's situations ranged from minor inconvenience to call the fire department immediately. Well, Max ran his hand through his perpetually messy hair. Remember how Diego said we needed to increase our daily sales by 30% to stay profitable? Yes. Bella felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. And remember how I said I had an idea to bring in more customers? Max, Bella said slowly, what did you do? He pointed sheepishly at a handwritten sign taped to the window. Storm Cafe Speed Dating. Tonight, 7 p.m. Find love over lattes. Bella stared at the sign, then at Max, then back at the sign. You organized a speed dating event at a cafe where you work. I organized a speed dating event at a cafe where we work, Max corrected with a hopeful smile that made her heart skip like a scratched CD. And before you ask, yes, I may have forgotten to mention this to Diego. Max! Diego's voice boomed from the office, answering that question immediately. Or not, Max winced. Diego emerged from the back office holding a clipboard and wearing the expression of a man who just discovered his life insurance was expired. 24 people, Max. 24 people signed up for an event I knew nothing about, in a cafe that barely functions on a good day, with you as the coordinator. 25, Max corrected cheerfully. Mrs. Henderson signed up too. She said Mr. Henderson won't mind. He's been dead for 3 years. Bella couldn't help herself. She burst out laughing. The sheer absurdity of the situation, combined with Max's earnest expression and Diego's existential crisis, was too much. This is not funny, Diego protested, though his lips twitched suspiciously. It's a little funny, Bella said, wiping tears from her eyes. Come on, Diego. What's the worst that could happen? Both men turned to stare at her with identical expressions of horror. You did not just say that, Diego whispered. Never ask, what's the worst that could happen around Max? It's like issuing a challenge to the universe. The universe loves a good challenge, Max said brightly, then caught sight of Bella's face and felt his brain temporarily short-circuit. Her blonde hair was catching the afternoon light streaming through the window, and when she laughed, she literally glowed. How had he gotten so lucky that this goddess had walked into his chaotic life? Earth to Max, Diego snapped his fingers. Focus. We have 3 hours to prepare for a speed dating event you organized without consulting anyone. Right. Max shook himself back to reality. No problem. How hard can it be? 6:47 p.m. I think the tables are on fire, Bella announced calmly, as if commenting on the weather. That's not fire, that's steam, Max called from behind the espresso machine, which was making sounds like an angry rhinoceros. Probably. The cafe had been transformed into what could generously be called romantic chaos. Max had arranged small tables around the room, each decorated with candles that kept going out, flowers that looked suspiciously like they'd been rescued from the garbage bin of the florist next door, and handwritten name tags that were somehow both adorable and illegible. Bella had to admit, despite the obvious impending disaster, there was something charming about Max's earnest attempt to create romance, even if that romance currently involved a lot of suspicious smoke. "People are starting to arrive," Diego announced, peering through the window with the air of a general watching enemy troops approach. The first to enter was Mrs. Henderson, resplendent in a purple dress that had definitely seen better decades, followed by a nervous-looking man in his 40s clutching a single wilted rose. "Theodore," Mrs. Henderson exclaimed, "I haven't seen you since your disastrous date with Linda Thompson." "That's why I'm here," Theodore replied mournfully. "Linda said I needed to practice talking to women who weren't my mother." "Excellent strategy," Mrs. Henderson approved. "I'll give you feedback. Brutal, but honest." More people began filtering in, and Bella watched in fascination as Max transformed from anxious organizer to charming host. He greeted each person with genuine enthusiasm, remembered everyone's names, and somehow made a speed dating event at a notoriously chaotic cafe seem like the most natural thing in the world. "He's really something, isn't he?" Diego appeared beside her, following her gaze to where Max was explaining the rules to a group of hopeful singles. "Yeah," Bella said softly, not bothering to hide the affection in her voice. "He really is." "You know he's crazy about you, right?" Diego said conversationally. "Like, pathetically, obviously, completely crazy about you." Bella felt her cheeks warm. "What makes you say that?" "Yesterday he spent 20 minutes asking me if your coffee order preferences might give him insight into your personality. He's analyzed your laugh pattern. He reorganized the entire storage room because you mentioned it was cluttered. The man is gone." Before Bella could respond, a timer dinged, signaling the start of the first round. "Ladies and gentlemen," Max announced, his voice carrying over the nervous chatter, "welcome to Storm Cafe's inaugural speed dating event. You have 5 minutes per person to discover if they're your perfect match or just a perfect stranger." The evening that followed was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Couples moved from table to table like pieces in a caffeinated chess game. Conversations ranged from awkward small talk to surprisingly deep connections, and somehow, miraculously, nothing caught fire. Well, almost nothing. At exactly 8:23 p.m., during the final round, the espresso machine made a sound like a dying whale and began shooting steam across the room like a caffeinated dragon. "Everybody down!" Max shouted, diving toward the machine with the heroic determination of someone defusing a bomb. In the confusion that followed, steam everywhere, people laughing and shrieking, Mrs. Henderson standing on a chair directing traffic like a purple-clad conductor. Bella found herself pressed against Max behind the counter as he frantically tried to shut off the machine. "I'm sorry," he said breathlessly, his face inches from hers. "I'm so sorry. I wanted tonight to be perfect, and instead it's just me. Disaster and chaos and—" "Max," Bella interrupted softly, reaching up to touch his cheek. "It is perfect." "How is this perfect?" he asked, gesturing at the steam-filled cafe where 24 people were having the time of their lives despite, or perhaps because of, the chaos. "Because it's you," she said simply. "And I'm falling in love with you, disasters and all." For a moment, Max forgot how to breathe. Then he smiled, that brilliant, devastating smile that had been making her heart skip since day one. "Really?" he whispered. "Really?" she confirmed, just as the steam finally cleared, and they realized the entire speed dating group was watching them with delighted grins. "Kiss her!" Mrs. Henderson shouted from her chair. "It's about time!" The crowd took up the chant. "Kiss her! Kiss her!" And as Max leaned down and Bella rose on her tiptoes, Storm Cafe witnessed its first official love connection, which wasn't between any of the speed dating participants, But between the gorgeous blonde waitress and the beautifully chaotic barista who had just created the most memorable first kiss in the history of caffeinated romance, Bella had kissed exactly 7 men in her 23 years of life. 6 of them had been forgettable pecks that left her wondering what all the romance novel fuss was about. The 7th was Max Torrent, and now she understood why people wrote poetry about kissing. She floated into Storm Cafe the next morning at 5:45 a.m., humming something that might have been a song if she could carry a tune, her blonde hair practically bouncing with each step. Even her reflection in the cafe windows looked different, brighter somehow, like someone had adjusted her personal brightness settings. Well, 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 Diego's voice came from behind the counter, where he was already preparing for the morning rush. Look who's glowing like a human highlighter. I don't know what you mean, Bella said, attempting nonchalance and failing spectacularly as she practically pirouetted to the coffee machine. Uh-huh. And I suppose that smile has nothing to do with a certain brown-haired disaster who spent 3 hours last night reorganizing our entire supply closet because, and I quote, everything should be perfect for Bella. Bella's glow intensified. He reorganized the supply closet, alphabetically, by brand, then by expiration date. I've never seen cleaning supplies arranged with such romantic precision. Diego shook his head in amused disbelief. The man has it bad. Before Bella could respond, the back door burst open and Max stumbled in, looking like he'd been struck by lightning in the best possible way. His hair was even more disheveled than usual, his shirt was inside out, and he was carrying what appeared to be a bouquet of kitchen utensils. Bella, he announced, as if her presence was the most wonderful surprise imaginable, despite the fact that she worked there every morning. You're here. I work here, she laughed, gesturing around the cafe. Where else would I be? Right! Of course, I knew that. Max's cheeks flushed pink. I brought you these. He thrust the bouquet of kitchen utensils toward her with the earnest enthusiasm of a knight presenting his lady with roses. Upon closer inspection, Bella realized they weren't just any kitchen utensils. They were vintage, beautiful, and clearly expensive. Max, she said softly, touched by the gesture. These are gorgeous. Where did you... I may have gotten up at 4 a.m. and driven to 3 different antique shops to find the perfect ones, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. I figured regular flowers die, but good kitchen tools? Those are forever. Plus, you mentioned wanting to try making pastries, and I thought... He was rambling again, and Bella found it absolutely adorable. Without thinking, she rose on her tiptoes and kissed him, cutting off his nervous babbling mid-sentence. When they broke apart, Max looked dazed. I should bring you kitchen utensils more often. Definitely, Bella agreed, her blue eyes sparkling with mischief. This is disgustingly sweet, Diego interrupted, though he was smiling. But we do have a cafe to run, and after last night's speed dating success, we're expecting double the usual Saturday crowd. As if summoned by his words, the bell above the door chimed, and Mrs. Henderson swept in wearing what could only be described as a victory outfit, complete with sequined beret. Theodore asked me out, she announced to the cafe at large. A real date, dinner and dancing. I haven't been dancing since Gerald's funeral, and even then it was more of a shuffle. That's wonderful, Mrs. Henderson, Bella exclaimed genuinely. When's the big date? Tonight, which means I need extra caffeine to prepare. This old body needs all the help it can get to keep up with a younger man. She paused thoughtfully. He's only 68, practically a child. More customers began filtering in, and Bella noticed something magical happening. Word about last night's speed dating had spread, but more than that, people were talking about Storm Cafe with genuine affection. The chaos that had once driven customers away was now drawing them in. Max's disasters had become part of the charm. Table 6 wants to know if you can make the coffee explode again like last night, called out Jenny, a regular, who'd started coming specifically to witness Max's spectacular failures. I don't make it explode on purpose, Max protested, though he was grinning. Could you try? asked a man at table 3. My girlfriend's never seen anything like it. Bella watched Max navigate the requests with growing amazement. Somehow, his complete inability to make normal coffee had turned into a unique selling point. Customers were actually requesting disasters. You know what? Max announced, struck by sudden inspiration. How about we make it official? Disaster specials, where something goes wonderfully wrong with every order. Max, Diego said carefully, are you suggesting we intentionally create chaos? I'm suggesting we embrace what we're already good at. Max's eyes lit up with the fervor of a man who'd just solved world hunger. Instead of fighting the chaos, we make it part of the experience. The cafe erupted in cheers and applause. Customers began calling out requests. Can my latte come with a small explosion? I want coffee that defies physics. Make mine impossible. Bella felt her heart swell as she watched Max transform from apologetic disaster creator to confident innovator. This was what she'd fallen in love with, not despite his chaotic nature, but because of it. He didn't try to be anyone else. He was authentically, unapologetically himself. Bella? Max appeared beside her, flour somehow already in his hair despite not having touched any baking ingredients yet. Want to help me create some beautiful disasters? With you? She said, stepping closer until they were almost touching. Always. Even when I accidentally turned the milk frother into a foam volcano? Especially then. Even when I somehow managed to make coffee that tastes like it was brewed by aliens? I'll drink every cup. Even when This time, she silenced him with a kiss that tasted like coffee and possibility and the kind of happiness that makes people write terrible poetry. Okay, you two, Diego called out, though his voice was fond. Less kissing, more beautiful disaster making. We have a cafe full of people expecting the impossible. As Bella and Max sprang into action, him immediately knocking over a jar of sugar, her gracefully catching it mid-fall, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Storm Cafe, illuminating a scene of perfect, chaotic happiness. And for the first time since she'd left her half-sister's house, Bella felt like she was exactly where she belonged, in the eye of the storm, holding hands with the person who made beautiful disasters feel like magic. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, but inside Storm Cafe, the only storms were the kind that brought people together, rather than tearing them apart. The kind that turned coffee spills into art, and first kisses into forever promises. The kind that made Bella believe in happily ever after, one beautiful disaster at a time. 3 weeks into what Bella had started calling the Max era of her life, she discovered that happiness, like coffee, came in unexpected flavors, and sometimes the sweetest ones were the most dangerous. She was humming while arranging pastries in the display case when her phone buzzed with a text that made her blood freeze. Family dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Don't even think about saying no. Penelope. Oh no, she whispered, staring at the screen. What's wrong? Max appeared beside her instantly, his disaster radar apparently extending to emotional crises. You look like someone just told you they're discontinuing coffee forever. Worse, Bella said grimly. Family dinner. That doesn't sound so bad. With Penelope and my stepfather, tonight, where they'll want to know everything about my job, my life, and... She gestured vaguely between them. Max's face went through several expressions, confusion, realization, then something that looked suspiciously like panic. And you don't want to tell them about us? No, yes. Bella took a deep breath. Max, you don't understand. My family, they're complicated. Penelope still thinks I'm doing her some noble favor by working here. And my stepfather... She trailed off, remembering Richard Blackwood's lectures about appropriate career choices and suitable companions. He won't think I'm good enough for you, Max said quietly, and the resignation in his voice made Bella's heart crack a little. Max, that's not what I meant. But he was already stepping back, creating distance that felt like an ocean between them. It's okay, Bella. I get it. I'm the guy who sets kitchen appliances on fire and considers flour in my hair a fashion statement. You're—" he gestured at her like she was a work of art. "You're you." "Max Torrent, you stop that right now!" Bella said fiercely, stepping closer and grabbing his flour-dusted hands. "You are the most amazing, creative, wonderful disaster of a human being I've ever met, and I am crazy about you. My family's opinions don't change that." "Then why do you look like you're about to face a firing squad?" Before Bella could answer, the bell chimed, and Diego walked in carrying a newspaper with an expression that suggested either very good news or the apocalypse. "We made the paper," he announced without preamble. "Good news or bad news?" Max asked warily. "That depends on how you feel about being called the most entertainingly chaotic dining experience in the city and having our weekend bookings triple overnight." Bella blinked. "We're successful?" "Wildly, inexplicably, beautifully successful," Diego confirmed, spreading the newspaper on the counter. "Miranda Sharp's review came out this morning. She called you two a master class in turning disasters into delight and said watching you work together was like witnessing organized chaos find its soulmate." Max read over Bella's shoulder, his breath tickling her ear in a way that made her completely forget about family dinners for a moment. "She said I was charmingly catastrophic, and you were the grace that transforms chaos into art." "There's more," Diego continued with a grin. "We've got calls from 3 food bloggers, a local TV station wants to do a feature, and Mrs. Henderson started a fan club. She's making t-shirts." Bella felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly knocked her over. They'd done this. Together. Max's beautiful disasters and her ability to see the magic in them had created something special. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Penelope. "Bring the boyfriend. Dad's curious." The pride deflated like a punctured balloon. "I have to go," she said suddenly, grabbing her purse. "The dinner. I need to prepare them. Explain things. Make them understand." "Bella, wait," Max started, but she was already heading for the door, her mind racing with strategies and explanations and ways to make her family see what she saw in Max without letting them destroy the beautiful thing they'd built together. 3 hours later, the Blackwood dining room looked like something out of a magazine, all crystal and candlelight and intimidating elegance. Bella sat at one end of the mahogany table, watching her stepfather Richard cut his steak with surgical precision, while Penelope held court about her latest shopping expedition. "So," Richard said without looking up, "tell us about this cafe job. Penelope mentioned it's been quite the learning experience." "It's wonderful," Bella said carefully. "I'm learning so much about business, customer service, teamwork." "And the other employees?" Penelope asked with the innocent tone that meant trouble. "Anyone interesting?" Bella's fork paused halfway to her mouth. This was her opening, her chance to tell them about Max, about how happy she was, about how love didn't always come in neat, predictable packages. Instead, she heard herself saying, "Just the manager and one other barista. Nothing too exciting." The lie sat in her stomach like a rock. "Good." Richard nodded approvingly. "Focus on your career, Bella. There'll be time for other interests later. Speaking of which, I've been thinking about your future. Henderson and Associates is looking for a junior marketing coordinator. Clean office environment, professional colleagues, real advancement opportunities." "I like where I am," Bella interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "Serving coffee?" Richard's eyebrows rose. "Bella, you're too smart for service work. You could do so much better." "Better than what?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "Better than working somewhere that makes me happy. Better than being with people who appreciate me for who I am instead of who they think I should be." "Bella," Penelope said carefully, "are you involved with someone at this cafe?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Bella looked around the table, at Richard's disapproving frown, at Penelope's calculating expression, at the perfect, suffocating elegance of the dining room that had never felt like home. And suddenly, she saw the evening with crystal clarity. She was sitting here, lying about the most important thing in her life, while Max was probably at the cafe thinking he wasn't good enough for her family. When the truth was, her family wasn't good enough for him. "Yes," she said quietly, then louder. "Yes, I am. His name is Max. He's brilliant and kind and creative, and he makes me happier than I've ever been in my life." Richard's fork clattered against his plate. "Bella." "And before you ask," she continued, standing up with a grace that would have made Max proud, "he's not rich, he's not conventional, and he probably wouldn't know which fork to use for the salad course. But he brought me antique kitchen utensils as flowers, because he pays attention to what I love. He reorganized an entire storage closet to make my work easier. He looks at me like I'm magic, even when I'm covered in coffee grounds." "Sounds chaotic," Penelope said weakly. "He is," Bella agreed, grabbing her coat. "Beautifully, wonderfully chaotic. And I'm going back to him right now because that's where I belong." As she headed for the door, she heard Richard call after her. "Bella, don't throw your life away on some—" She turned around, her hand on the doorknob. "Some what, Richard? Some man who loves me exactly as I am? Some job that makes me excited to get up in the morning? Some life that's mine instead of the one you planned for me?" Without waiting for an answer, she stepped out into the night, pulling out her phone to call a taxi. As she waited, she typed a text to Max. "Coming back to you. Save me some chaos." The response came immediately. "Always. I'll be here, probably setting something on fire. Can't wait to see you." Bella smiled, looking up at the stormy sky that matched her mood perfectly. Thunder rumbled overhead, but for once, she wasn't afraid of the storm. She was ready to dance in it. Bella arrived at Storm Cafe at 9:47 p.m. to find every light blazing and what sounded like a one-man war happening inside. Through the rain-streaked windows, she could see Max moving around like a caffeinated tornado, flour literally flying through the air. She pushed through the door and stopped dead. The cafe looked like a bakery had exploded in the most beautiful way possible. There were pastries everywhere, on tables, counters, hanging from strings like edible decorations. The air smelled like vanilla, cinnamon, and pure magic. "Max?" she called, brushing rain from her blonde hair. He emerged from behind the counter, covered head to toe in what appeared to be every baking ingredient known to humanity. His hair was white with flour, his shirt had rainbow sprinkles stuck to it, and there was chocolate on his cheek. He looked absolutely ridiculous. He looked perfect. "Bella!" His face lit up like Christmas morning. "You came back!" "Of course I came back," she said, stepping closer. Did you bake everything in the cafe?" "I may have stress-baked," Max admitted sheepishly. "When you left for that dinner, I started thinking about what your family would say about me, and then I thought about losing you, and then I thought about how much I love you. And somewhere in there I decided to make eclairs." Bella's heart stopped. What did you just say?" Max froze, his green eyes going wide with panic. I made eclairs? Before that. I stress-baked? Max. He swallowed hard, flour puffing from his hair as he ran a nervous hand through it. "I said, I love you. Which I know is probably too soon and too crazy and too much like something I would do, but Bella, I can't help it. I love the way you laugh at my disasters. I love how you make everything better just by being there. I love that you see magic in my chaos. I love—" Bella silenced him with a kiss that tasted like sugar and possibility and forever. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his flour-dusted one. "I love you too, you beautiful disaster," she whispered. "I told my family about you tonight." Max's eyes searched her face. "How did that go?" "Terribly," Bella laughed, surprising him. "They think you're completely wrong for me. They think I'm throwing my life away. They think I've lost my mind." Max's face fell. Bella, they're right about one thing, she continued, stepping back and spreading her arms wide. I have lost my mind. I've lost the part that cared about their approval more than my own happiness. I've lost the part that thought love had to look a certain way or come in a certain package. She moved closer again, reaching up to wipe chocolate from his cheek. But I've found something better. I've found someone who loves me enough to stress bake an entire bakery's worth of pastries. Someone who sees beauty in chaos and magic in mistakes. I really did make a lot of pastries, Max said weakly, gesturing at the wonderland around them. I noticed, Bella grinned. What's the occasion? Well, I was thinking, if your family doesn't approve of me dating you, maybe they'd approve of me marrying you instead. The words hung in the air like sugar crystals, sweet and impossible, and perfect. Max Torrent, Bella said slowly, are you proposing to me in a flower-covered cafe surrounded by stress pastries? Maybe, Max's voice cracked slightly. I know it's insane. I know we've only known each other for a month. I know I'm a walking disaster who can't make coffee without some minor catastrophe. But Bella, I also know that I want to create beautiful chaos with you for the rest of my life. He reached into his flour-covered pocket and pulled out a ring made of twisted cinnamon dough. It's not a real ring, he said quickly, his cheeks burning red. I mean, I have a real ring. Well, I will have a real ring, but I was stress baking and thinking about you and… Yes, Bella interrupted. Yes, it's crazy. Yes, you understand why I made a dough ring. Yes, you think I need professional help? Yes, I'll marry you. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of rain against the windows and Max's sharp intake of breath. Really? He whispered. Really, Bella confirmed, holding out her left hand. Put that ridiculous, perfect ring on my finger. With shaking hands, Max slipped the cinnamon dough ring onto her finger. It was still warm from the oven, slightly lopsided, and absolutely perfect. I love you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I love you too, she replied, then started laughing. We're engaged. We're actually engaged with a cinnamon ring in a flower-bombed cafe at almost 10 o'clock at night. Too weird? Max asked nervously. Perfectly weird, Bella assured him, pulling him down for another kiss. Outside, thunder crashed and lightning illuminated the storm, but inside Storm Cafe, surrounded by the evidence of Max's stress-baking frenzy, Bella had never felt more at peace. This was her life now, unexpected, chaotic, covered in flour, and absolutely perfect. Diego's going to lose his mind when he sees this mess, Max said, looking around at the pastry explosion. Diego's going to lose his mind when we tell him we're engaged, Bella pointed out. Good point. Maybe we should clean up first? Or, Bella said, grabbing a handful of flour from the counter, we could make it worse. She threw the flour at Max, who stared at her in shock for exactly 2 seconds before grabbing his own handful and launching it back. Within minutes, they were in a full-scale flour war, laughing and shrieking and making an even bigger mess than before. This was love, Bella realized, as she dodged a flying croissant. Not the neat, predictable kind her family expected, but the kind that made you want to have flour fights in coffee shops and say yes to cinnamon dough rings and dance in the rain of your own beautiful chaos. Bella, Max called out, pausing in his attempt to use a baguette as a sword. Yeah? Thank you. For what? For seeing the magic in the mess, he said softly. For making me believe that disasters can be beautiful. Thank you, she replied. For showing me that the best storms are the ones you dance in instead of hiding from. And as they stood there in their flower-covered cafe kingdom, wearing their ridiculous pastry-scented clothes and their cinnamon engagement ring, Bella knew that this was just the beginning of their beautifully chaotic love story. Some fairy tales ended with glass slippers and pumpkin carriages. Theirs would end with coffee stains and flower fights, and the kind of happiness that made ordinary Tuesday nights feel like magic. And honestly, that sounded perfect to her. 6 months after the Great Cinnamon Proposal, as Diego had dubbed it, Bella discovered that planning a wedding while running a chaotically successful cafe was like trying to juggle flaming torches during an earthquake, theoretically possible, but requiring a level of coordination that neither she nor Max possessed. The flowers are wrong, the cake fell over, the photographer double-booked us, and somehow Max managed to accidentally invite his entire high school graduating class, she announced to Diego, slumping dramatically against the espresso machine that had finally learned to behave, mostly. Let me guess, Diego said without looking up from his inventory sheets. You tried to plan everything yourself instead of hiring a wedding coordinator like a normal person. We're not normal people. Bella gestured wildly with her engagement ring, now a beautiful vintage piece Max had found at an antique shop, though she still wore the cinnamon ring on a chain around her neck. Normal people don't get engaged with pastry rings in flower-bombed cafes. Fair point, Diego conceded. Where's your disaster of a fiancé? Testing wedding cake recipes, for the 4th time. This week. Bella rubbed her temples. He's determined to make our wedding cake himself because, and I quote, anyone can hire a baker, but only I can put my heart into your cake. Sweet. Terrifying, but sweet. The bell chimed, and Mrs. Henderson swept in wearing what appeared to be a wedding planning outfit, complete with clipboard, measuring tape, and a determined expression that suggested she was ready for war. Emergency intervention, she announced. Theodore and I have been discussing your situation, and we've decided you two need professional help. Mrs. Henderson, that's very kind, but, Bella began. Not therapy, dear, though Max could probably benefit from some anger management classes for kitchen appliances. Wedding planning help. Theodore's daughter is a coordinator, and she owes me a favor. Before Bella could respond, a crash came from the kitchen, followed by Max's voice. It's fine, everything's fine, just a minor cake explosion. See? Mrs. Henderson raised an eyebrow. Professional help. 2 hours later, Bella found Max sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by what looked like the aftermath of a cake-based natural disaster. He was covered in frosting, holding a spatula like a defeated warrior's sword, and staring at the remains of what might once have been a 3-tier wedding cake. How bad is it? She asked, settling beside him on the flour-dusted floor. The bottom layer imploded, the middle layer slid off and took out 3 mixing bowls, and the top layer, he gestured weakly at the ceiling, where chocolate cake was somehow stuck to the light fixture. I'm not entirely sure how that happened. Bella looked at the chaos around them, frosting on the walls, batter handprints on the cabinets, and Max looking like he'd been personally defeated by wedding planning, and started laughing. It's not funny, Max said miserably. I wanted everything to be perfect for you. The cake, the flowers, the music. I wanted to prove I could do something right for once. Max, Bella said softly, reaching over to wipe frosting from his cheek. Do you remember our first day here, when you dropped plates on my head? Not my finest moment. It was perfect. Not because the plates didn't break, but because you laughed about it, because you turned a disaster into something magical. She took his hand, sticky with frosting and all. I didn't fall in love with you because you could make perfect cakes. I fell in love with you because you make imperfect things beautiful. But it's our wedding, Max said desperately. It's supposed to be special. It is special, because it's ours. Bella stood up and pulled him to his feet. Come on, I want to show you something. She led him to the front of the cafe, where the evening light was streaming through windows she'd decorated with fairy lights and pictures of their journey, the newspaper review, photos from the speed dating night, candid shots Diego had taken of them working together, covered in flour and completely happy. This is our love story, she said, pointing to the collection. Not perfect, not conventional, but ours. Every disaster, every laugh, every moment of chaos that brought us together. Max stared at the display, his eyes growing misty. When did you put this up? While you were stress-baking version 4 of our cake. Bella stepped closer, taking both his frosting-covered hands in hers. Max, I don't want a perfect wedding. I want our wedding. I want the flowers to be a little crooked, the cake to lean slightly to the left, and the photographer to accidentally capture you setting something on fire. You want me to set something on fire at our wedding? I want you to be you. The you I fell in love with. The you who makes disasters look like art. Max was quiet for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. So, if I accidentally turned our wedding cake into ceiling decoration, I'd marry you anyway. And if I somehow managed to set the altar on fire, I'd marry you in the ashes. And if I tripped walking down the aisle and took out half the wedding party, I'd marry you on the floor. Max pulled her close, frosting and flour transferring to her dress, and kissed her like it was the first time and the last time, and every perfect, imperfect time in between. I love you, Bella Blackwood, he murmured against her lips. I love you too, Max Torrent. Disasters and all. Especially the disasters? Especially the disasters. Behind them, unnoticed, Diego had been quietly cleaning up the kitchen catastrophe. But he paused in the doorway to watch the two people who had turned his struggling cafe into the most talked-about love story in the city. Tomorrow, Mrs. Henderson's wedding coordinator daughter would arrive and help them plan a ceremony that would be beautifully imperfect. The flowers would be slightly wilted, the cake would probably lean, and something would definitely catch fire. It would be exactly what they wanted. But tonight, they had this. Flower-covered floors, frosting-stained clothes, fairy lights twinkling over their chaotic love story, and the absolute certainty that they were exactly where they belonged. One question, Bella said, pulling back to look at Max. How did you get cake on the ceiling? Max grinned. That brilliant, devastating smile that had made her fall in love with him in the first place. Trade secret. But I promise to teach you after we're married. Deal. Bella laughed, sealing it with a kiss that tasted like frosting and forever. Outside Storm Cafe, the city hummed with its usual evening rhythm. But inside, surrounded by the beautiful wreckage of attempted perfection, Bella and Max danced slowly to music only they could hear, preparing for a wedding that would be perfectly imperfect and absolutely theirs. Some love stories were built on grand gestures and flawless moments. Theirs was built on dropped plates, exploded cakes, and the revolutionary idea that the best kind of love wasn't perfect. It was real. Wedding day, 1 year later. If someone had told Bella Blackwood Torrent, she loved how that sounded, that she would spend her wedding morning helping her groom unstick a 3-tier cake from the ceiling of their reception venue, she would have laughed until she cried. Now, standing on a chair in her wedding dress, holding a spatula while Max climbed a ladder in his tuxedo, she was laughing until she cried, but for entirely different reasons. Almost got it, Max called down, cake frosting in his perfectly styled hair. Just need to… Oh no. Oh no what? Bella asked, though experience had taught her that oh no from Max could mean anything from minor inconvenience to calling the fire department. I may have grabbed the wrong part of the cake. The middle tier chose that moment to detach completely from the ceiling and land with a spectacular splat on the floor, sending frosting flying in every direction like sugary confetti. Maximiliano Torrent, came a voice from the doorway. Get down from that ladder this instant. Bella turned to see Mrs. Henderson marching in, resplendent in purple silk and wielding a bouquet like a weapon. Behind her came Diego, Max's parents, and what appeared to be half the wedding party. 30 minutes until I do and you two are recreating the great cake catastrophe of last month? Diego asked, though he was fighting a smile. It's tradition now, Max said cheerfully, climbing down the ladder. No major event is complete without at least one spectacular disaster. Darling, Max's mother Eleanor sighed with the patience of someone who'd spent 28 years watching her son turn simple tasks into adventures. Please tell me you have a backup plan. Actually, Bella said, wiping frosting from her veil, we do. As she walked to the corner of the room and pulled away a white cloth, revealing a stunning array of individual cupcakes arranged on a tower display, each one perfectly imperfect, with slightly lopsided frosting and decorations that looked handcrafted with love rather than professional precision. Mrs. Henderson and Theodore made them, Bella announced, because apparently everyone in this town has learned to expect and plan for our beautiful disasters. "They're gorgeous!" Eleanor exclaimed. And indeed they were. Each cupcake was a tiny work of art, decorated with edible flowers and buttercream swirls that somehow managed to be elegantly messy. "Crisis averted," Diego announced. "Now can everyone please get to their places? We have a wedding to execute, and I use that term with full awareness of its double meaning." As the wedding party dispersed to make final preparations, Bella found herself alone with Max in the frosting-splattered reception hall. "So," she said, reaching up to straighten his tie and accidentally smearing more cake on his lapel, "any last-minute disasters you'd like to create before we say I do?" "Actually," Max said, pulling her close despite their mutual cake-covered state, "I think I've reached my disaster quota for the day. Unless you count falling more in love with you every time you laugh at my chaos." "That's not a disaster," Bella said softly, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. "That's magic." 2 hours later, the wedding ceremony took place in the garden behind Storm Cafe, which had been transformed with fairy lights, slightly wilted flowers. They were beautiful in their imperfection, and chairs arranged in what could generously be called artistic disorder. As Bella walked down the aisle, carefully navigating around a small puddle where the sprinkler system had malfunctioned earlier, she looked out at the assembled guests and felt her heart swell. Mrs. Henderson and Theodore sat in the front row, holding hands and beaming. Diego stood as Max's best man, looking surprisingly emotional. Her stepfather, Richard, and Penelope had actually come, sitting stiffly in the back but present nonetheless. And there, at the altar, stood Max. His hair had been professionally styled, but was already rebelling in 3 different directions. There was still a trace of frosting on his cheek that everyone had missed. His boutonniere was slightly crooked, and his shoes had somehow gotten muddy between the reception hall and the ceremony. He was absolutely perfect. When she reached him, he whispered, "You look like magic." "You look like trouble," she whispered back. "Always." The ceremony itself was beautifully chaotic. Max dropped the ring, twice. Bella's veil got caught in a rose bush, and during their vows, a bird decided to make its nest in Bella's hair. But when they kissed, sealing their perfectly imperfect union, the assembled crowd erupted in cheers that could probably be heard 3 blocks away. "Ladies and gentlemen," the officiant announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Torrent. May your marriage be filled with love, laughter, and just enough chaos to keep things interesting." As they walked back down the aisle, now husband and wife, Max leaned over and whispered, "Ready for a lifetime of beautiful disasters, Mrs. Torrent?" "Bring it on, Mr. Torrent," Bella laughed, squeezing his hand. "Bring it on." 5 years later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Storm Cafe, illuminating what had become the most beloved breakfast spot in the city. The walls were covered with photos, newspaper clippings, and love letters from customers who'd found romance over coffee and chaos. Bella stood behind the counter, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, a flower handprint on her apron, and a smile that could power the entire espresso machine. At her feet, 3-year-old twins Oliver and Charlotte played with toy coffee cups, already showing signs of their father's gift for creative disaster. "Mama, look!" Charlotte announced, having somehow managed to get Play-Doh stuck in her hair. "I made coffee." "Just like Daddy," Bella laughed, reaching down to examine the purple blob her daughter was offering. "Speaking of Daddy," came Max's voice from the kitchen, "has anyone seen the— Oh no!" The familiar crash was followed by Max's head appearing around the corner, sheepishly grinning and covered in what appeared to be pancake batter. "Let me guess," Diego called from his usual spot at table 6, where he now came every morning as a customer rather than manager, though he still occasionally shouted instructions. "You tried to flip 12 pancakes at once." 15, Max corrected, emerging fully to reveal the extent of his breakfast battlefield. "I was feeling confident." "Daddy's messy," Oliver giggled, clapping his hands with the pure joy of a child who'd inherited his father's appreciation for beautiful chaos. "Daddy's always messy," Bella said fondly, walking over to wipe batter from Max's eyebrow. "That's why we love him." "That's why you married me," Max corrected, pulling her close for a kiss that tasted like maple syrup and morning happiness. "One of many reasons," Bella agreed. Mrs. Henderson, now 83 and still a daily regular, looked up from her crossword puzzle. "5 years of marriage and you two still make me believe in true love. Though I do think you should consider hiring a cleaning service." "Never," Max and Bella said in unison, then burst into laughter. Outside, the city was waking up, people hurrying to jobs and appointments and the serious business of ordinary life. But inside Storm Cafe, surrounded by the beautiful chaos of pancake-battered walls and Play-Doh coffee and children who thought disasters were the best kind of entertainment, Bella knew she was exactly where she belonged. She'd started this journey trying to escape her half-sister's shadow and had found something infinitely better, a shadow she wanted to dance in for the rest of her life, cast by a man who turned every disaster into magic and made her believe that the most beautiful love stories were the ones that started with broken plates and ended with forever. "Bella," Max said softly, pulling her attention back to him. "Yeah? Thank you. For what this time? For saying yes to the job nobody wanted. For staying when I dropped plates on your head. For marrying me with a cinnamon ring. For making every ordinary Tuesday feel like an adventure." Bella looked around at their beautiful chaos, their thriving cafe, their flower-covered children, their life that was perfectly imperfect and absolutely theirs. "Thank you," she said, rising on her tiptoes to kiss the man who had taught her that the best storms were the ones you chose to dance in, for showing me that sometimes the most beautiful disasters are the ones that lead you home. And as the morning sun continued to stream through the windows of Storm Cafe, illuminating a love story that had started with broken dishes and grown into a lifetime of beautiful chaos, Bella Blackwood Torrent knew that some fairy tales really did come true. They just came with a lot more flour than the books mentioned. The end.